Assalamu alaikum. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be standing here, first of all, in this circle. So let me start my presentation by asking you a question. How many of you in here have, at some point when you were learning English, walked into a classroom, English language classroom? Naturally, you're an outgoing person, social, very happy. But you leave that day feeling subdued, a little disappointed, maybe a little stressed or anxious. Anyone in here? Does that sound familiar? This is also a personal experience. The same thing happened with me as well. When I was learning English, I remember walking into a classroom, not knowing anything, not even enough about myself, and seeing all the students from different countries, because this was in the United States. Seeing students from different countries, but no one knows each other's language. The only thing we have in common is English, and that we don't know either. But that kind of environment can be a little too much for someone who's extremely introverted, like I was, for someone who doesn't know what to expect from an English language classroom, from a teacher, from the students. So here I am today. I'm going to share my own personal experience, and this is actually my everyday work, but still talking about it kind of makes me nervous. So building confidence through creating supportive, safe learning environments in an English classroom in the country of Uzbekistan. Let me tell you first about, what makes supporting learning environments so important that I decided to talk about it for my second TEDx speech. Because as a teacher myself, as an educator, as a person who is every day working with children of all ages, I can tell you supportive learning environments are crucial to help build confidence in children, especially young ones who maybe naturally are shy or kind of reserved, especially in our culture. Uzbekistan's culture can make students a little introverted. I'm one example, because we have sometimes, not everywhere, in some communities in Uzbekistan, there's this idea where traditional values are held so strongly. There's the idea that only the elders speak. Only the elders, people who are older, like parents or older siblings, speak, but the younger ones have to listen. They need to be quiet. They need to remain quiet. They're not really encouraged to share their feelings, emotions, what makes them nervous or what makes them anxious from school or with their friends. We're not really encouraged to do that in many communities here, because this is how our culture traditionally was before. Nowadays, I'm happy that this is changing, but still, there are still some communities who have this culture. So when a student here goes into a classroom to learn a language, they don't expect something like memorizing, like math, or looking at pictures, like art class, drawing pictures, or even looking at maps like geography. But they come here they don't know what to expect from a language classroom. So it's very important that the teachers make them feel welcome and kind of show what's going to happen with the language process. Because most students here think of language learning as something that can be done in a few months. While I myself have been through this process, living in the United States, in that environment, learning English, I would say beginner level of English took more than 3 months, which sadly in here, in learning centers and education places, we only give 3 months for beginner level. So one thing, we have to look at the challenges first before we start to learn about how to create supportive learning environments. What creates this anxiety among students, among children? What creates this problem that we need to look into the topic of creating supportive learning environments for children? Number one thing, like I said, is the cultural aspects. In our culture, we need to be more encouraging of young children to be open to different experiences. We need to encourage them to work with one another. And that all starts with home and also kindergarten level. Even in the kindergarten, children may not know that they're learning something, but through play and through interactive games, through discussions, open, comfortable discussions, we can encourage students to get together with their peers and learn something. The second thing is the methodological parts. For example, many learning centers in Uzbekistan and schools, we mostly depend on rote memorization to teach a process, to teach a language. But language learning is a process. It doesn't only depend on rote memorization. There's heavy focus on learning grammar, which in my learning center, I've experienced that it's not the best way because we get students who come into IELTS lessons, but they have very big gaps in their grammar, even though that was the main focus when they were studying English. So that got me thinking, why is that? They study grammar for a year and a half before they start to prepare for the exam. But there's still lots of gaps, like not enough experience with speaking, not enough experience with writing. They're mostly reading from textbooks that somebody else wrote. They're encouraged to read somebody else's voice, but not really encouraged to produce their own language. And that's really what the exams test, how well students can produce language and understand what they're producing. But most schools here in Uzbekistan, sadly, focus on only some aspects of language learning, which makes the whole process not very enjoyable and kind of incomplete. The third part is the inadequate amount of resources in some parts of the country. There are some schools where they may not have enough resources. They may have unequal access to quality education, maybe not good enough teachers or teachers without good enough qualifications. But in those places, students have to deal with whatever's given to them, but they're still expected to produce the same results as students in other more privileged areas in Uzbekistan. So these three aspects, cultural, methodological, and environmental, I would say, they affect students' confidence in themselves because it creates anxiety in them in the process of learning a language. When they're not sure about how they're learning a language, when they don't understand that it's actually a process that takes a long time and constant encouragement, positive reinforcement, they continue thinking this is how it is. And then they apply the same ideas to other subjects in their schools. So what can we do about this? There are some ideas here that a lot of schools in Uzbekistan have already applied. First one is learning has to be student-centered. It has to be. It can't be textbook-centered. It can't be teacher-centered. It has to be student-centered. And I've myself have sat in classrooms when I was younger, when I was a student in Uzbekistan. And after I came back from the United States, when I went to some learning centers to see how they teach, I've actually experienced this idea that the teacher was always right, no matter what they say. And this kind of ties into our culture. Whatever the elders say is always right, and the kids have no place, no right to question them. But I've experienced something different in the United States. There, they actually encourage children to question everything. They encourage them to ask why. Why? Why is this? Why is it like this? It promotes critical thinking. It helps the students to think for themselves, to fend for themselves. When they go out into the real world, they can actually manage being independent without fear of failure. But here, many learning centers don't focus on students learning. They focus on completing the textbooks in the given amount of time, which is not really the most optimal way of teaching. The next thing is there's always has to be positive reinforcement and encouragement. That's basically saying you can do it, keep going. Even if they don't show excellence right away, they have to be continuously supported and encouraged. They have to be encouraged to foster communication with foster collaboration with their peers. I had some pictures here as well. That's an example of positive encouragement. Very simple. Giving a high five. I usually do this with my children. When they do something well, I ask them, give me a high five. So the idea of high-fiving or even saying, good job, you did it, tells the student that they're in the right path. They can keep going with the way they're doing. The process is going well. Besides that, Using all kinds of interactive activities and games helps students to feel encouraged. It helps them to feel a sense of belonging in the classroom. That's another problem. I myself experienced this before as a student. I didn't feel like I belonged in my classes. I didn't feel like I belonged in my school. While I was a happy student, happy person on my street, with my friends on the street, I was a different person at school. Maybe the school made me feel this way. I wasn't encouraged to speak my voice. I wasn't encouraged to participate in many activities. I was kind of on the sidelines. And that really affected my feeling of independence, my feeling of learning something, feeling of achievement, fulfillment. And that really can have long-lasting impacts on students' emotional well-being and mental well-being. So here's an example of our classrooms. We encourage children to constantly create something different from their peers. So everyone who's doing something different knows that they're part of a team where everybody is doing the same thing. Like they say, you are unique just like everybody else, right? Also, letting children work in teams. Collaborative approach is very important because that's how the real world is. When I was studying my master's in business administration in the United States, all of our projects, case studies, included teamwork. That's because our professors would say, that's how the real world is. We can't let you work on a project on your own because that's not how it is in the real world. You have to be able to be competitive with others. So that learning has to take place in school. When students work together, not only do they share a feeling of community and sense of belonging, they also feel like their voices are heard. So they're not on the sidelines, stuck, wondering how other people are doing, but they're part of the process. They're part of the challenge. And then they're part of the success of that group. But we all know it all starts at home. Parents, number one, they play the number one role in children's education and their well-being, emotional well-being. Parents have to be involved in child's education in every step from preschool or kindergarten all the way to graduation, maybe even after that for some students. So when parents are involved in a student's learning process, they tell the student, don't worry, if you don't have support at school, you'll have me. You have my support, and I will encourage you. I will keep you motivated. I will stand behind you. I will support you through whatever you're doing. And it's okay to fail sometimes, because some students really take it to heart when they don't do well in school, let's say in exams. But when parents tell them it's okay, that it's just a number, they keep on going. For themselves, they will keep on achieving higher results. Not for the parents, not for the school, not for somebody else, but for themselves. Because they have that confidence in themselves now. Community support is also very important. In Uzbekistan, I haven't seen many places where students can feel supported in the community. One example would be public libraries. So far, I know one public library. And my suggestion would be to have more public libraries, probably in every community, maybe close to every neighborhood, where students can walk to the library instead of having to need someone to drive them. Having more libraries, more programs that support student learning, that help students with resources, maybe if they don't have enough resources, would be a really good starting point to encourage all the children of Uzbekistan to be their best in the future, because everything starts with childhood. So I encourage every teacher in here, maybe every community leader in here, to support your students. No matter what they're feeling, how they're feeling, keep encouraging them to do positive things. Giving them high five every day, or maybe giving them a little sticker that says, well done. It goes a long way. Thank you.